Batu, Barada, Nikto.
You must remember those words.
Gordon's alive.
You know what the Turing test is?
I know Kung Fu.
Dead or alive, you are coming with me.
My God, it's full of stars.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Stories Out of Time and Space. I'm your regular host, Scott Weatherly, and as always, I'm joined by Julian Darius. Julian, how are you doing? You okay?
Oh, I'm delighted. We get to discuss Transformer.
That's right, we are back.
Like it's a guilty pleasure.
Yeah, it's a return to the Transformers, but it's a first for Michael Bay. It is a first for us. This is our first Bayverse kind of movie. But this is obviously what we've been doing with this season. We've been returning to certain franchises and doing sequels and sort of follow-ups and that sort of thing. And yeah, we are doing the 2007 Transformers film. I'm not even going to bother explaining the plot, if I'm perfectly honest. Transformers come to Earth. There's some fighting and actually some hijinks, and Shia LaBeouf's in it and Megan Fox. That's all you need to know. We'll talk about the plot as we go. But let's hit it then. Let's get right into it. Julian, what are your thoughts then? Initial thoughts on Transformers 2007?
Well, maybe we could start with sort of like what we remember of this film at the time. I mean, I think this is a fine movie. I think it holds up. I think it's a legit good movie. It is. We talked sort of before the podcast about how there are parts of this that are sort of like 10 out of 10 and parts of this that are like 2 out of 10 or 1.
Yeah.
It is very uneven. There are just some embarrassing things that are just stupid mistakes that you think, why would you do this in terms of dialogue or whatever? It's really embarrassing stuff that I think in retrospect would get worse as the series progresses. One thing that I always think about seeing this again is all of the flaws from the later movies are in this film. They're just forgivable in this film. But those Michael Bay-isms that will eventually just metastasize movie after movie after movie and get worse and worse are already here. The cancer's in the bones of the movie already. But having said that, it is an amazing, amazing film. I do really enjoy this.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. One of the things I would say is, and I want to echo that point is, but I hadn't watched this first film in quite a few years, but I have seen some of the sequels more recently, and some of the sequels I really, really don't like. We may get to them at some point, but I really don't like. They're overlong, and I think they're sort of like they're too reliant on certain things, and it gets messy. And so I had they had tarnished my memory of this film, where I was saying to myself, I remember kind of liking this film, but everything else in this franchise irritates me, or there's parts of that franchise that really bother me. So I'm not sure how I feel about that original film. I think it's going to be rubbish. It's Michael Bay. It falls into that Bayverse kind of thing. Oh, he did the Turtles as well, and they're dreadful, and so on and so forth. And although he's not directly involved, obviously this has still got Steven Spielberg in as an executive producer, so you sort of get that feeling that there's a bit of the Spielberg influence in this at times.
Yeah, you feel it for sure.
Yeah. And so watching it this time back, I was quite surprised where I got to the end and I was like, I had a lot of fun with that. Like, as you say, like there's moments where I'm scratching my head where I'm like, why have you done that? Like that part, we'll get to some of them. But there's others where I'm just like, yeah, no, this is solid and it's really well shot and it looks good and it's fun. And I mean, just going with it. What I would say is, we were off air, we were talking about some other films that sort of like have this similar feel. But this was one of those films that if 8-year-old, 9-year-old me, that had obviously gone through the Terminator cartoons, watched this, it would have blown my mind. Like,
Yeah.
absolutely blow my mind. You know.
I think that, going back to when it came out, I mean, Transformers was kind of in a bit of a lull.
Hmm.
It is amazing. We're going to do the first 3-part series on the Patreon
Hmm.
of the animated show. So, I mean, I grew up on that. I had a bunch of the original toys. I sort of checked out for Beast Wars, and there was a lull in between. And then basically Transformers has gone strong. Now in
Mm.
the '80s, it was sort of competing with GoBots. GI Joe was a much stronger franchise.
Yeah, yeah.
Now it's the opposite. So I mean, when Transformers came back, and today Transformers has across all of these shows, which I'm sort of going back and watching stuff that I missed or don't remember that well, over 1,200 episodes.
Wow.
I mean, like, no, this is crazy, right? Now they're all in crazy different continuities. Continuity has never been the forte of the Transformers, but and sadly so. But so when this came out, the idea of doing a live action Transformers was mind blowing.
Mm.
And this was very much still a sort of '80s nostalgia property. Some people remember Beast Wars fondly, but this was part of that sort of '80s nostalgia wave of movies, right?
Mm.
And we didn't have many of these big superhero movies yet. This is still 2007. We're not into, like the Marvel movies proper, Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's just barely eking forward.
Well, no,
Barely
it'd be
started.
the year after. Both the
Oh, that's
Incredible
right.
Hulk and Iron Man would come out in 2008. So this is the year before.
Right. So, like, I mean, we've got like Fantastic Four and Daredevil and stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that, and X-Men and Spider-Man. But so the idea of doing live action Transformers was as shocking to me in 2007 as it would have been doing live action dinosaurs in Jurassic Park.
Yes.
This had that kind of like watershed movie feel to it. And so this movie makes a lot of choices with the franchise. Some I like, some I don't. But and a lot I don't, but I understand why they did. And I don't think they're stupid
Mm.
choices. But like you said, like the 8-year-old me is just like, I cannot believe some of the stuff in this movie.
Yeah.
And it is so amazing, and it has so much fun with just the joy of doing this for the first time. Even with a small cast of Transformers to keep the CGI budget down, it looks great. The CGI looks better than a lot of movies I see now.
Mm. Mm.
And it does have the like sort of, to me, Jurassic Park came to mind. Also, the '78 Superman of sort of, you will believe a man can fly. Sort of like you will see live action Transformers.
Yeah. No, I think one of the things you're hitting on the head. I think you are totally right. And maybe it's too, but this is a seminal film, and I don't think people realize why. For some good and for some bad. But you mentioned like the GI Joe films. Well, yeah, but the GI Joe films with Channing Tatum and eventually like The Rock came because of this. We also then got, unfortunately, the redo of the Ninja Turtles and other stuff. But like, it opened up a sort of a realization of like, oh, hang on, those things that have been considered impossible can be done and can be done relatively well or very well. And so I think there's a reason that there is stuff that you now see in a lot of films. I think this gave license to stuff like, yes, we'd have, Iron Man come the year after, but like beyond Iron Man and stuff, like I do think there's stuff that franchises have taken or has been made possible because of this film.
Mhm.
I do think, Transformers is on that milestone path of making modern cinema.
I think so too, and for some good and ill, to be
Yes,
honest. I
no,
mean,
I agree. Yeah,
I
for good
love,
and bad. Like it has some
yeah.
good influence, and it's also it also given us some other stuff. But yeah,
Well, I mean, I think that's like a continuation of the Star Wars effect, right?
Hmm.
Where, Star Wars sort of helped invent the blockbuster, but also codified stupid movies as what the public wants to see, with lots of explosions. If that codified it, this recodified it for the CGI 2000s era.
Yes.
Um, and while I'm glad that we got a lot of those movies, even if I don't like some of them, I'm an 80s kid and it's good to see, I'm always not mad that something exists, right? Even if
Mm.
I didn't like it. Yeah, I mean, Michael Bay was never accused of being the most intelligent filmmaker, and the sheer explody noisiness of this, especially as he gets more of a budget and more license in the sequels, gets worse and worse.
Yeah.
But I do have to say, as much as I think this movie focuses too much on the human characters, which was one criticism. Partly that's for budget. Those human characters work, and they
Mm.
work in this movie. They don't really work in any of the sequels, but they really work here. I mean, I'd say any of the sequels except for Bumblebee, which goes
Mm.
back to the girl in the car. Here is the boy in the car. One thing that I came away from this film thinking at the time was how there was a whole genre in the 80s of a boy in his car movies, of like License to Drive and things like that, that really sold that. I mean, there was a magic to getting your first car. And I don't think that magic exists anymore. I don't think I don't see that as the seminal moment in a young man's life, or a young girl's life. But this took me back to those movies and to a kind of very particular subgenre of 1980s movies that I enjoyed as a kid, way before I could possibly think about getting a driver's license. I understood the freedom of having a car.
Yeah.
And this sells that so amazingly well.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think one of the things that's is that thing that one of the reasons this film does work is because of the human cast. And I will throw out that, like, talking from if you're going to talk about it from a 2023 standpoint, and you're telling me I'm going to have a film with Shia LaBeouf, Megan Fox, Tyrese Gibson, and a few others, you're a bit like, John Voight. I'm like, wow.
John Voight? Yeah, that's not a good cast today.
No, I'm like, okay, you're not selling me on this cast, really. But when you go back and watch this, it works. Like, you're right, it's worked. This is a much younger cast. Shia LaBeouf has a certain energy. I think at one point even Spielberg described him as like, he's like a young Tom Hanks. Like, this is what Hanks would have been like in the 80s, when you're thinking like, Bachelor Party, The Burbs, those sorts of kind of things. And Megan Fox is actually pretty good in this. She's incredibly attractive, but she actually plays the part well. She's a sympathetic character. And everyone comes across kind of well in this because it's toned down. Mm-hmm. I think it's because it feels toned down for the most part. The characters kind of land. When it gets off the rails in certain places, that's when I'm like, okay, yeah, the energy is sort of like losing me a bit on this. And they introduce, in particular, Anthony Anderson, the guy who's the hacker who eats all the donuts. And those, and there's a few characters like that. I like him in stuff. I've seen him in other stuff. He's actually funny. I find him quite good. But in this, he just feels out of place. Like, he feels like a touch too far into the comedy, where I'm like, okay, you're sort of pulling me out of this now a little.
Well, let's talk about these characters, the human characters and the acting. I agree with you. I had completely forgot this whole hacking group with this other absurdly beautiful woman, and I had completely forgotten those characters existed. I was like, oh yeah, they were part of this. I mean, I remember the military characters who are sort of the weakest part of every Transformers movie. And I always, even at the time, thought, make it G.I. Joe. Just call it G.I. Joe. It makes no difference, And of course, in retrospect, I'm sure they wanted to. This was actually made in lieu of a G.I. Joe film. They wanted to do a G.I. Joe film. And then the invasion of Iraq happened. and they're like, yeah, let's back off of that for a year or two, and Transformers seemed a safer bet. And you can see I mean, it's been said many times that Michael Bay shoots military scenes as if it's pornography.
Yeah, not
you
by.
know,
Yeah, but I'd say it's been said by Michael Bay. Like
no,
Michael Bay, he fully acknowledges it. Like, if you've ever seen the film, is it 13 Days or 13 Hours?
mhm.
13
Yeah.
Hours. I mean, it's not a bad film. It's actually a really solid sort of war action film. But like in that, like when I've seen interviews with him, like he is like, no, I think the military do a great job, and I want to sort of venerate them and show them as to how fantastic these guys are and the bravery. Da da da. Like he's all about the military. And one thing I should say, just to throw in there, the US military has a contract with a number of studios, or they have it in their contract. If you are going to depict any branch of the military, they get final say as to sort of like they will tell you to edit things out. And so
they have approval.
They have approval. I'm
It's
pretty
really
sure that
messed
like,
up.
yeah,
No,
it is.
and they did for this movie helped establish that contract.
Yeah,
because they had the level of military involvement in this movie is absurd. I mean,
yeah.
like they've mounted cameras on F-22s. It's completely mad how much military involvement is clearly there.
Yeah, but I love the fact that like now when Michael Bay turns up to like do it in the military, like no, go for it. You do whatever you need to do, Michael, because we know we're going to come out of this looking fantastic.
Yeah, they probably got a spike of enrollment, after Transformers came out, where it's like, I get to fight Scorponok in the desert, Yeah. I mean, that's true, and I'm uncomfortable with that. I mean, that's part of the the legacy of this film and of Bay that I'm uncomfortable with, and in addition, obviously John Voight, was a Trump supporter, and
conspiracy theorist,
lies. Yeah, sure. Okay, but let's talk about the acting of the characters. I can go along with the Josh Duhamel. In this, he's fine. He's sort of plays an everyman soldier. I think Shia LaBeouf is not just competent here. I think he is straight up great. I think this is the performance of his career, and I think he plays this within an inch of his life. I think it is tonally right on. He makes me laugh. He makes me feel stuff. He is better than possibly any actor I've ever seen in this movie at playing the everyman who's like a fish out of water, who's dealing with an alien invasion. I mean, the look on his face as he turns, to leave to carry that Allspark is like, I mean, when I would pause the movie to go to the bathroom or get a drink or something, I'd come back and just be like, I can't believe this expression on Shia LaBeouf's face, that it's dead to rights. And even with brilliant actors, you randomly pause the scene and you're like, yeah, that might, so-and-so, looks weird in that moment. Shia LaBeouf is just dead on. He plays that teenager, and that, again, it brings me back to being a kid and the love of the car and all of that, to have him want to be with that girl and be so awkward. And he, a key moment is when he's talking to his dad and trying to keep his dad from coming into the yard, where all of the Autobots have inexplicably decided to, to wander in robot mode. And he's like, no, I love you, Dad. And he says, sleep tight, handsome man. But he's so awkward. He manages to sell the comedy, and you really feel his nervousness.
Well, he's
been pegged as that character.
Well, I think the thing is, he's been trying to fight out of that character for a long time. Because I think you're right. I think beyond this, he obviously had the second and the third film, and then he did a couple of others, like around this time. And you're right in this. He's good. Like I actually, I think he works well. I think it works well because he has really good chemistry with the two people that play his parents, Kevin Dunn and I've got to find it now. That's weird. I should have so far down. But yeah, the actors who play his parents, there you go, Julie White. He has good chemistry with them. I feel there's just enough silly, sort of almost American Pie, sort of like family comedy stuff that's not too far, but it kind of works. It's almost relatable in that sort of sitcom-y kind of way, and that always good. But you're right. I think beyond this, I think Shia LaBeouf has forever been trying to sort of like distance himself from this by doing more and more crazy things. And unfortunately, it's made him almost unusable in modern cinema. But the other thing I would say is that sort of about chemistry on this. I think like one of the things, and I would say before we do praise some of the acting, we do praise the acting. I do want to sort of say it's the good. I think like I said about Megan Fox, as you said, Josh Duhamel. I think all the guys in the military unit kind of work mostly. They're sort of they're serviceable, especially in the battle at the end. I do like them. However, Megan Fox has since come out and sort of given some stories about how she was treated on set and this other stuff. And so I want to put it in that context of like, yeah, now I'm sort of seeing some of the camera angles, and this was one of her big breakout films, and she was encouraged to do certain things, and you're a bit like, yeah, this is definitely a boob film as well, but it kind of needs to be, because it is a sort of a this sounds really sexist, but it's a boy film. This is very much a boy fantasy film. This is a male fantasy film.
Yeah, I don't think it needs to be, right? I mean, I think Bumblebee proves it doesn't need to be, right? But I think that there was a perception of that at the time.
Yeah.
I mean, I looked at Megan Fox's comments, for this because I sort of wanted to refresh my memory about how bad it was. And I mean, it seems like part of why she wasn't on the third one is that she compared him being Michael Bay to Hitler, and that Spielberg was not going to have that, having done Schindler's List, and so, I mean, and part of being young is that you make irresponsible comments, especially when you're young, to the press. But so, yeah, I mean, the other thing is apparently aspects of her character were cut that would have made her a stronger character. That she originally told off the football star, as she left, and she, when the movie makes a much bigger deal about her having a juvie record and being a criminal than it really should, then I think it's logical. And originally she, basically told Sam off about that. So it's clear. I mean, look, this is Michael Bay's choices, right? I mean, and I don't have a problem. I want to be on record. I don't have a problem with attractive women. I don't have a problem with, the male gaze in movies, quote unquote, if you own it and say, yeah, of course, that's a part of the appeal of this, and the same thing, I don't have a problem with the female gaze of the camera lingering on somebody's pecs, as they've boned up to play the movie. Now that doesn't happen here as much, but I mean, I'm not opposed to that cinematography, but it is of a piece with a movie that treats her as the prize to win. And I like that she knows cars better than the boys, but she is seduced by muscles, right? She talks about having a problem, and she is clearly as competent as he is, but by the end, just is relegated to being his accessory. Like she drives Bumblebee in conflict.
Yes.
She's really important, but at the end, he saves the world, not her, right? Like it's still, the camera loves him. The camera wants this to be his movie.
I would say though that I think that's the thing is this is, and I was thinking this whilst I was watching it. This has multiple plots and multiple characters, but it comes down to a single character, and that single character is supposed to be your point of view character. Like, if the perception was when they were making this film that this is a boy centric, a male fantasy film, then Shia LaBeouf is your way in. Like you are. That's your that Sam Witwicky is supposed to be your sort of way into this film, and that he does well in doing that. And so this is that male gaze, that male fantasy. So by the end of it, like he has become, he's worked with the army. He's become the warrior. He got the girl and he got the car. He's now part of a wider group and things like that. Like it's all part of like this. It's almost like the hero's journey.
The American dream.
Well, sort of, the Bay versus Michael, American dream. And so I think that's the point. I would say though, like you say, the Megan Fox character, Michaela, is interesting because she is. What's weird is we talked about these ups and downs. There are scenes when she's incredibly competent, like she opens up the bonnet on the Camaro that is Bumblebee, and she's able to. She knows cars. More than that, later on, like she stands up to the military, and she sort of does stuff. And like you say, in the battle at the end, like she's the one that drives the truck with Bumblebee on the back into battle, like in reverse as well. No, you know, like
I know.
I sometimes
You and I couldn't drive backwards down a city street at 30 miles an hour, let alone 60.
Yeah. I sometimes struggle to reverse into a parking space. So, like, she shows her to be competent. You're right, but then, like you say, it sort of slightly keeps pulling the rug to be like, oh, she can't be better than the boys. We need to keep sort of her, and it's kind of sort of like, you know, again, I understand.
Which is ironic because she says that about you know, guys don't like when you're better at cars than you. So she's called the movie on its bullshit.
I was about to say, that's the thing. Like, yeah, Michael Bay even calls himself on his own bullshit by giving her that line. And you're like, huh, all right, fair enough. But she's actually she is a good character in this. One thing we've been talking to, because I do want to come back to some of the actors, because they do have some interesting bits. The one thing I wanted to touch on before we get to some of the action is the humor in this.
Well, first, let me just say that, let's wrap up the Michaela thing. I agree with you, but I will say, you know, my theory of like all of the things that are problems in the late Transformer movies are sort of here in acorn form, right?
Yes.
You know, by the time you're in like Age of Extinction, you have a close up on an underage girl's butt, you know, for no reason whatsoever. And she's going up the stairs and she's a teenager. You know, she's underage. I mean, so is Michaela. But I mean, where it like serves, there's no point. You can't even justify it. It's like she's working under the hood on the car. You know, this is subtle by comparison.
Oh yeah, yeah.
You know, in all the future movies, they won't have these lines about Michaela being competent at cars and having to deal with the macho culture.
The two things I'll highlight from the later films, you make a good point. I believe it's the third one where Sam is dating a blonde model, and there is excessive scenes of basically almost like upskirt shots of her age, I think, right? And she walks around in underwear at one point, and you're like, oh, okay, we are beyond giving these women any sort of story or anything. Like, she's literally a device for the plot and nothing else other than a pair of legs. And then the other one is, and it's renowned now, is a character, I believe if it's not Age of Extinction, no, it is Age of Extinction, the first one with Mark Wahlberg.
The character,
and her boyfriend.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, but her boyfriend carries around in his wallet a card referring to the Romeo and Juliet law, just to highlight that he is not committing statutory rape on Mark Wahlberg's daughter. That's
not creepy at all.
No.
And I mean, So I mean, that is the character I was talking about with this. Sort of like Mark Wahlberg's talking about, like, I'm gonna protect. She's my daughter, dude. And then you've got like a shot of her butt as she's walking up the stairs or something. That's just of her butt. It's not even like, okay, so you're wearing tight jeans that cut off too high. You know, I don't think that's realistic. It's just like, okay, forget it. Just zoom in on her butt. Get in closer. Oh yeah, no. So this is a thing. And
you are right, though.
It's there in this.
Yes.
It's just toned down to the point where it gets a pass.
Yes, it is. No, I agree. You can. There's almost like a teenage broness about this film that you just go. There's an adolescence to this film that you go. And I know this is not an excuse for things like, I know, in this day and age you can't say boys will be boys and that's, gendered or whatever. But there's almost like a sort of like a bro kind ofness about this film that sort of you go, it's what it's there to do, but it gets worse. That's sort
You're
of
also right that Sam's in high school. And so, like, one of the most obvious things is when the famous shot of Megan Fox working under Bumblebee's hood, right? And but it's played for humor. It's got a little wink at the audience where he looks at her and he puts his head on the other side of the hood and just kind of goes, sort of to the camera. And, it's like, okay, I don't need that scene. It's a little potentially groany, but I'm willing to go along with it because he's a teenage boy and it's kind of winking at the camera like, hey, I know we're doing a hot shot here. Okay,
we know
sorry.
this is cheesecake, but
Yeah.
this is the point. Yeah, I agree. Talk about the humor though, because the humor, like I say, is again is that acornness.
Mhm.
You have Bernie Mac in this, and I actually kind of like the Bernie Mac scene where he's selling in the car. It's a bit heavy handed in that, but he's funny, and I kind of like him, and I'm like, cool, I'm down with that. That's funny. You've got Bernie Mac, he's a comedian. And then it starts to sort of keep going with things like, when they have like, and they seem to give John Turturro sort of, they're trying to make him some sort of like weird, sinister, funny character. When he has like they're called Section 7, and he has his S7 vest on, and he gets peed on, or like lubricant sort of sprayed onto him by Bumblebee, and it just keeps going. And then you get like, the little, you'll notice, but the one you're met in the very beginning, the one that's on Air Force One that turns into a
Frenzy, yeah.
frenzy, and then turns into
I
a
don't think
phone.
he's named in the film.
No, but like you get humor with him bouncing around on different things, and he makes funny noises, and it's sort of you keep getting that kind of humor, and again, there's like times where I'm just like, this humor's not working for me. And again, they introduce Anthony Anderson. Is that whole thing where he sort of like, if you eat the donuts, you're showing that you're not guilty because you're comfortable to eat the donuts. And the moment they walk in, he's like, she did it, and I'm just like, oh, okay, you're still going with the humor, and it just, I don't know. So for some reason, like Michael Bay can't do. It's too heavy-handed. It just doesn't. The comedy in this doesn't work for me. On it keeps missing. I think that's a problem. That's one of the problems. But it gets worse throughout the sequels. But I don't know. What are your thoughts on that element?
Yeah, I don't think the comedy misses as much for me. I mean, but I would say, and I don't think it misses 100% in the sequels. But I will say when it misses by bigger and bigger margins, right? Like it just, I mean, and it just goes on. Like I would say, like all the comedy here, I'd say probably a lot of it misses, probably most of it misses. But I know what they were doing, right? Like I know what they were going for. Um, as it goes on in the sequels, more and more, you kind of just hold your head and go, like, what were you thinking with this shot?
Yeah.
So,
like
I mean,
Transformers. Do you mean like Transformer testicles later on, and those sorts of things?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so I would kind of classify two main problems there, and I'm okay. I don't think it's funny, but I think the Sector 7, S7 Superman symbol, like I know what you're going for there. I think that actually communicates about his character. I don't laugh, but I think Shia LaBeouf is the only one who can kind of pull off comedy in this movie at all. But um, but I will say that the two kernels there that bother me are potty humor generally and racism.
Yes.
So, so the potty humor is, you sort of forget it. It's sort of pardonable. But you mentioned already Bumblebee peeing on John Turturro.
Yeah.
And this is Bumblebee, such a beloved character. Right? Like you've got Bumblebee straight up urinating on John Turturro as punishment.
Yeah.
Dousing him in Europe, and it's done as a joke, and it's over fast enough that you can kind of pardon it. But then,
it's also a learning thing because obviously the dog weed on Ironhide, right. I think so. You've seen it as a bit of a it's almost like a payoff, but like yeah.
Okay, so what I would say is I was going to mention that with the churro, the
Chihuahua,
merci. Urinating, on Ironhide. So there are 2 urine jokes. Okay, that is way too many for any Transformers movie. Okay, like tone down the urine jokes, and this is the beginning of the potty humor, right? Yeah. And it will just continue, and it's so, like you were saying, there's a kind of like adolescent male energy to this that is absolutely Michael Bay, and that energy continues and gets ramped up as opposed to maturing, right?
Yes.
And that is a big problem. I mean, so for me, I think you get 1 Transformers urine joke per episode or movie. You cannot have 2. And so the fact that there are 2 actually really upsets me. And the fact that Bumblebee is urinating on somebody,
Well,
it is upsetting.
I agree, but what I find that, I mean, that's the thing. One of the things I want to say about John Turturro, because I really like John Turturro. I think he's a great actor, and I've seen him in a number of things where he is funny and he's very good, but he can also play sinister. Like I've seen him play kind of sinister and stuff. But in this, one of the things is Sector 7 is supposed to be played as this above top secret organization. It's above the government. It's got all this sort of, whatever. It's been around for centuries, decades at least. Blah 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 blah. All right. You meet several representatives of Sector 7, right? You have the actor Michael O'Neill, who plays Tom Banachek, who is the guy that sort of turns up with the briefcase and sort of says, Mr. Secretary, you want to see what's in here. He's a very serious dude. He's like, I've come direct from the president. Like, he's playing it quite serious. He's Sector 7. And then you have, like, John Turturro, whose character sort of just is like, I don't know, comic relief. Like, how does anybody take orders from this guy and take him serious? And he says a line at one point, which has always bothered me, where he says about when he reveals Michaela's criminal record, and he just goes, "Criminals are hot," and you're just like, "I'm sorry, pardon, I don't understand. Are you coming on to this 16-year-old girl? Like it's really creepy."
That is what. So I would say John Turturro is. I agree with you. Like, I grew up with John Turturro. Like Miller's Crossing. I watched when it came out. You know, like I always loved John Turturro, and so going into this movie, I always thought, well, at least I hope John Turturro has an amazing role and gets every acting gig after this. And then he is the most disappointing actor in this movie. Like, how is that humanly possible?
You say about Acorns, so you say about Acorns, because his character comes back repeatedly and gets worse and
it's
worse.
No better.
Yeah.
Right. Well, so, I mean, and this is part of a bigger problem, which is too much comic relief and too many comic relief characters. So you're right, totally about John Turturro. There's also, that guy who has the briefcase who shows up. He also says, like, I think it's he who makes that crack about, my crazy government paycheck, which is like another kind of groan-worthy line. Like, that's not the case, but also like those soldiers and the Department of Defense, they earn their paychecks. But, these guys are, the namby-pamby bureaucracy we don't like. And this is like this kind of dumb conservative thing of like, the government is bloated and stupid, but at the same time, we like our military, which is the biggest over-bloated and stupid part of the government, but nobody wants to admit it.
The wording is actually his obscene government paycheck. So
there's a lot of obscene things in this movie. That's not one of them.
Yeah.
But no, so I knew exactly what line you're talking about. And, where Turturro, he's revealing her, and he says, she's a criminal. Criminals are hot.
Yeah.
He sneers it. And he sneers it in this close-up of the camera that's like, it's like, now he's not turning it up to 11, he's turning it up to like 22.
Yeah.
And it's utterly absurd. And it's not okay. So first of all, it's about a teenage girl who is in handcuffs in his car under his protection, right? All kinds of inappropriate. Also, he's a government agent who is saying you can't trust her because she's a criminal. At the same time, I lust after criminals. Being a criminal is so fun and attractive. This is like an anti-smoking campaigner saying, yeah, but the problem is the cigarettes look so damn sexy, don't they?
Yeah, it is. It's like using Mad Men as an advertisement against anti-smoking. You're like, no, look, John Hamm looks amazing. One of the things is, though, like you say, with the Turturro character, and this is where I think the film starts, with the issues. Later on in the film, when they go to Hoover Dam and they have, they reveal Megatron and all this other stuff, and you get Josh Duhamel doing his thing, and they all come out and they all fight at a local town, which I don't know what it's supposed to be, but Lennox and the soldiers all look cool. At no point does Totoro's character, Agent Simmons, take part in that battle.
That is very strange. Yeah.
And he should be. This should be the point where you're like, oh, he is a complete buffoon, but actually he needs to be shown as competent in that battle. Because that would then, he needs to do something and he doesn't. And it's really bizarre that he sort of falls out the film for the finale. And it really sort of stood out to me this time.
Talking about acorns, this is like, okay, too many comic relief characters, right? You've got like, also, it should be pointed out, there are 2 black actors in this movie. They're both comic relief characters.
Yes.
Right? I mean,
no, there are 3. There are 3, and you're still talking comic relief because there is Bernie Mac, Tyrese Gibson, and Anthony Anderson. And all are used as comic relief. So, yes.
And there is, but, to be fair, there is also an extra African-American character who is the Transformer Jazz, who refers to people as bitches and, speaks in the worst shot possible, and then manages to be the only Autobot who gets killed. It's this is a movie about alien robots, and you still manage to kill the black guy. How racist are you? And these were things that bothered me in the movie theater the first time I watched this. Like, this is not. I just want to point out, this is not like some revisionist wokeness.
No. One of the things that made me like, I wanted, because we haven't. One of the things, we're 40 minutes in and we haven't even talked about the actual Transformers yet. We will get to them. But when they're introduced and they have that sort of like round table of them introducing themselves and they all do something cool to look like they're cool. Jazz's breakdancing and stuff.
That's a thing that black people do in 2007.
I was quite taken aback with how much that stands out as being such a choice. I was like, yes, you sort of said like, you said like some of the choices. I was like, yeah, there was a choice made there. They made a choice. Because he doesn't even, and it's also what I would say is about his death as well. We'll get to the end. Like, Jazz doesn't even really get like a heroic death. Like, he gets he gets torn in half.
Yeah, and I get why you need to kill an Autobot, right? And you need to establish Megatron is here now, and he's deadly, and he's going to kill somebody. You need to do that. That's smart writing. But then he just tears Jazz in half. Jazz doesn't even get to, like, look, this is a franchise where nobody dies without getting like a 10-minute last word goodbye, right? Jazz doesn't get anything. He's just torn in half. And then at the very end, Optimus Prime is like, we've lost Jazz. And that sentence just continues like, but we've made new friends.
Can I just say how much worse though that scene is for anyone that hasn't seen it yet? Because not only so that final scene when the battle is over and they do mourn Jazz for all of 30 seconds, don't forget Optimus is holding the remains of Jazz. And he's like, he's like, oh well, we lost a great warrior and an old friend. But we've made other friends and we can move on. Yeah. Like, he might as well just chuck him over his shoulder and walk away.
Yeah, no, and I'm creeped out by that too. Yeah. And then I find myself thinking like, well, they're aliens. Maybe they have a different attitude toward a corpse, right? Because they recycle or, But I know it is uncomfortable. Yeah. And it is racially uncomfortable. I mean, and these are choices. And again, it's the kind of thing where, like, watching this the first time through, I thought, okay, you don't want all the Autobots to sound white, right? Okay, I'm glad you made that choice, right? But is your idea that all black people sound like Jazz in this movie and breakdance? Like, and clearly you went stereotypical with that, right? And there's no logical explanation. And that's the kind of thing where I saw this and said, okay, I like this movie. I really admire this movie, actually. But it has problems like that I hope will be fixed in the sequel and as the series goes on. And instead, all of those problems just multiply and get way bigger. And, everybody is a racial caricature. The racial issues in this franchise are shocking,
Yes.
and they just get worse and worse.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Like you said, it's another acorn. It's another little
mhm.
acorn, an acorn of racism that's going to grow into a big tree of, oh, that's what they decided to do. As films
Yes.
go on, and not just of of almost every ethnicity. Like
Yes.
there is sort of Asian characters, there's black characters, there's
Oh.
it gets bizarre. Yeah,
And it gets worse even with the human characters. I
yes,
mean, I think when we next see John Turturro, he's running a deli,
yes,
because that's what Jews do. Because
yeah.
that's true. Like
So
he's trained to be like he's run an agency of the government with processing secrets. The moment he's not employed, he's going to do one of two things. He's going to be a banker or run a deli. It's like the Donald Trump version of race, right?
yeah.
Like,
Well, it's funny. What I find interesting is like and I will criticize, I will and openly criticize sort of Michael Bay and some of the writers for doing this.
mhm.
However, at no point like John Turturro could have easily gone, could I be doing something else? Like
Well,
anything. I don't mind owning a shop, but like, can we not have it as like something else? Like,
yeah. Well, I mean, another problem you mentioned this issue of him disappearing in the final act,
mm,
and this is another acorn is the sort of like the bad structure of Michael Bay movies and of these Transformers movies that there, I forgot. Not only do you have multiple you have three different groups of humans, not all of whom you really need. You
hmm
don't really need these tech people. The military can figure it out on their own. They don't, and it's just another human group, another, black comic relief character. Um, but don't forget, Sam has a best friend. I forgot Sam has a friend. Sam has a best friend
yeah,
who he leaves, who he takes to meet Michaela, and then he ditches him to pick up Michaela and give her a ride home. At no point is the friend ever seen again in this movie or any of the sequels.
yeah.
Like, as far as we know, he dies of exposure having been left where he
That's it.
was.
Well, he
Like,
was left behind. He was beaten to a pulp by those jocks,
uh-huh.
and then, like you say, died of exposure on the side of the road overnight. That's a very different
Yeah.
film. That's a
that's the end credit sequence that didn't make it in. It's just his body lying there going, Sam, come back.
what? Yeah, it's
But
just
there are as the sequels go on, there are these
yes,
structural things where it's like, what happened to that character? I don't know. He just disappeared from the movie. Like literally, this is writing 101.
but they do this for things like characters that come and go. These weird characters, because and maybe we will do these one day, but
Oh yeah.
we'll get
No, I'm
through.
gonna make you.
Yeah, because the only other character that always springs to mind as an actor, there are what this series seems to do is take actors that have incredible careers and are known for doing fantastic work, and then putting them in a role where you're like, what the hell are you doing? And I would now look at John Malkovich and Anthony Hopkins and be like, what the hell? What happened to you? Who did you owe money to that you ended up doing these?
Well, first of all, let's be clear, they're whores. Okay.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
now look, I am too. You give me $5 million. We were talking about this beforehand. Like, I will act in whatever you want me to act in,
Yeah,
right?
I had higher expectations of like John Malkovich, but yes,
No.
yeah.
Well, the other thing is reportedly it is just so much fun to be on set
Oh, I
with
can
Michael
imagine.
Bay.
Yeah, I can imagine
And it's
these are
just like,
great fun.
and also like he gets in the mud. He's fun as a director. People say it's like a nonstop party.
Mm.
And obviously Megan Fox had a different experience.
Yeah,
But
she was
for a
but
lot
she
of
was the
people,
one that was being sprayed with beer and stuff at the party. So
yeah, that's
that's
probably true.
yeah,
And so it's different, especially for some of these guys who went into acting because they were nerdy or
mm.
they were, and it does occur to me if Michael Bay has an analog in this movie, it's the jock who
Gets left behind.
who
Yeah,
gets left behind. But even Sam is kind of presented as like a jock's idea of what this character would be, right? He's
yeah,
still kind of a dumb all American kind of boy.
yeah.
Um, and Michael Bay doesn't really know smart guy nerd culture.
No. One of the
But
things I
you
would
could see
say,
an actor being like, yeah, I mean, I
oh,
grew up, I was, and now I get to be the jock is running the party, and I'm invited to the cool show.
well, basically that was actually what Anthony Hopkins said. I think was because and Last Night is easily the worst of these, but um,
Oh
uh,
no, no, no! I think Age of Extinction is
oh, okay, it'll be interesting when we get to those. But Anthony Hopkins is on the record of saying like he was like he does all these sort of like period pieces, does all these very serious films, and this was his opportunity to do something silly, insane, and so I can completely understand that. Because we have got to get to, I really want to get to the. We haven't got to the Transformers yet. Because the other thing I want to talk about is to say, talk about the Michael Bayisms of this. Is the editing in some scenes is almost unwatchable. Like it's almost epilepsy inducing, some of the sort of the editing, but also some of the he has that thing for the sort of like the spinning upshot that he uses, and he perfected in sort of like Bad Boys and Bad Boys 2, and that, and he uses it sort of relatively sparingly at times. But he gives it to odd people. So Bernie Mac in a comedy shot, when sort of Bumblebee fires out like a sound thing to sort of shatter all the windows in the car lot, Bernie Mac then gets this confused look and he gets the spinning hero shot. And I'm just like, wow, that's an odd choice to give it to this character at this point in the film. All right, fair enough.
Yeah, this is a very good point actually, because I think that those Bayisms are, and even that editing. I mean, again, let's be clear, the same thing's true of Batman Begins, and every Chris Nolan fight scene. But yeah, there are those moments where it's sort of tone deaf cinematically, where you think, why are you giving this to Bernie Mac? And again, I think it kind of masks the fact that is a totally illogical scene. Why would Bumblebee shatter the windows of all of the cars? And then secondly, why would having induced massive losses in repairs greater than all of the money you're going to get, why would you then sell the car for less? How is that your response? I don't understand anything about that scene.
No.
But it still kind of sells itself in a weird way. Like
well,
it still kind of works.
It works in that same 80s way. And this is an 80s film in 2007. And I think there are the scenes like that are reminiscent, and it works because of the charisma and the comedy of Bernie Mac, and I think of Shia LaBeouf's reaction, and even the dad. The three of them sort of bounce off each other. Kevin Dunn plays it kind of well, and I like it. So it doesn't make sense. You're right. But it's to say the editing throughout this has that, where they sort of like, you'll give certain people certain shots, and you're just like, you go, I get, or sometimes it's like, I understand why you've given it to that character, just not in this scene. Like, why is that? Why are you sort of giving there's a scene of John Voight when they're trapped in the bunker and stuff, and there's a lot of fighting going on, and he gets a similar shot where it sort of pans round him in this big thing, and you're like, there's supposed to be fighting going on, and you've literally just slowed the pace down to give this one panning shot. I don't understand what is like. Who in editing has gone, that's a good idea, Michael. Yes, we'll do that, because it really keeps the pace going. Like it's bizarre at times.
Yeah, and I think also Michael Bay he's really bad at communicating senses of place, or even giving like those indicators that a scene is done, right? Like in that whole sequence is where they're fighting Frenzy as he's invading, and this little guy is a big menace, and then Frenzy just kind of knocks his own head off with like a boomerang throwing star, and it's kind of like, oh, but he's knocked his own head off before and come back. Like there's no indication that he's really dead, and it's just dropped.
Yeah,
we don't need to come back to that. But there's no like, they don't stand over him and smash him or something, or say like, "Whoa, I'm glad that's over," or even anything that would let you know, okay, the scene is over. I know what the takeaway from this scene is. There's a weird way in which those shots are part of, for all of his obvious technical skill, he seems to have difficulty in communicating, like, to me, what's the takeaway?
No, I often think this comes down to Michael Bay starting as a music video director, in that I think there's a lot of that a lot of the transitioning you get from scene to scene, especially towards the end of his films, is very much like that music video. It's like, all right, we're going in for the riff. The riff's finished. Move on. Do this. Do that.
Mhm.
And that's what you get. And I think that sometimes with the scenes where it's like big fight, down to down. Now we've stopped. Now we move, down to down. And it's just sort of like you hit with so much stuff that it's not until you sort of stop and you go through it scene by scene that you sort of go, what happened? What happened to that person? Sorry, did they win that fight? I'm really sorry. I'm really confused about that. Like, what happened there? And what's funny is I was comparing this end battle, and I was thinking about Man of Steel in the same way, and going like, oh, there's lots of destruction, and there's other things, and do the heroes help those that are that are in danger? Yes, they do, and there's also other stuff going on. But I was like, why is it then that actually the Zack Snyder Man of Steel one bothers me, and actually I get to a point where I'm like, ugh, I'm bored of watching this. Where actually with this, it actually probably makes less sense, but I'm kind of in the moment, and that sort of was like, the editing, although it's fast paced and it's probably given me an aneurysm in some way, it pulls you in to such an extent that you're not questioning stuff. Where I'm just sort of like, I'm in it for the ride. This is a big cartoon. It's like a music video. I'm being hit with them, with those sort of like big guitar riffs and the big beats, and I'm just in it and I'm going on the ride. And he's very, very good at bringing you along that ride. And it's not until you get to the end that you go, wow, that was an amazing roller coaster, but I don't really know what happened.
Yeah. No, I think that's true. And there were a lot of, look, he made a movie called The Last Night, in which I have heard podcasters debate who is the last night.
Yeah.
I don't know what the title means. Like, he made it. There's a movie called The Dark of the Moon.
Yeah.
Which apparently refers to the dark side of the moon, which is a thing that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
But I know what you're talking about, and I thought of Man of Steel too. And I think that this, first of all, Man of Steel goes way longer.
Yeah.
Especially, and it's only two people. Here, part of why Bay is able to get away with some of this is because he's selling such a sense of chaos in the middle of a conflict. And that really works with war movies, right?
Yes. Yes.
War movies are like that. And war is like that. And so when you have multiple Transformers fighting in a cityscape, it should feel chaotic. And you should have trouble keeping track of where everybody is. When you have two guys fighting, that's very different. But I thought of Starscream, crashing through the building, and thought, oh, that's Man of Steel 6 years earlier. And I think I like it better here.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Like, why is it work here, but it doesn't work somewhere else? Because the other film, actually, I wanted to just double check. It's actually a Ridley Scott film. But the other film that brought to mind when I was watching the ending is Black Hawk Down. Which, and that's a Ridley Scott film, but that carries along on a very similar sense of chaos and panic, but that's done because you're not supposed to feel and know what is going on, because you're supposed to be sort of pulled into it as one of the soldiers that was there, and that's why I think it does work. So yeah, it's funny that you say that, because I do think you're right. I think having those different levels of action and that chaos actually works really well for the finale of this film, and I really enjoy it actually. In that sort of as a war movie, it feels like a battle. It feels like a running urban battle, and I like the fact that everyone gets something to do, and you do get big heroic moments of like Bumblebee and being driven backwards down the street and saving people, and Devastator coming in and sort of blasting the crap out of things. Like, it all works really well for me, I think. Let's talk. Yeah. Should we talk about the Transformers quickly in a minute? Sorry, make your point, and then we'll.
Yeah, please. Well, I just want to say, to correct the record, it is actually Megatron in plane mode that's crashing through the building with Optimus. But it works great. And I think, even to think about later films, Bay is so good at the sense of chaos and so good at that music video, just kind of like. And there are moments where, especially in later films, you think, I don't know how we got here. I don't know what anyone's objective is anymore. Like, I'm totally confused about any of that. But I'm sold on the chaos of this action set piece. Like, I really feel a sense of stakes, even though I don't know literally what the stakes are. But he's like directed this within an inch of its life.
It's that
And
thing though, isn't it? Of
he's
like,
so good and so bad at the same time.
yeah, no, you're right. It's a bit like getting hyped up on candy and sugar,
Mhm.
and you're all like, "Oh, I'm buzzing," and you're like, someone telling you it's a bit like, this is really important. And okay, is it okay? I'm really hyped. I don't know what's going on, but I'm in it. I'm like, like paintball or something like that, where all of a sudden, like, you are in it, and at the end of it, you sort of look back and you go, "I've no idea why I was so hyped," or like, or the sugar rush ends, and you're just like, "Oh man." Yeah, that was not as big as I thought it should be. But it does in that moment, it kind of works. Let's talk about the Transformers, though. I actually want to talk about the Autobots and the Decepticons in this film, because we haven't. So we do get them. We've mentioned Jazz, and we obviously get Bumblebee. We sort of mentioned Bumblebee. We get Optimus Prime, Ironhide, and who else is there? Ratchet. And on the other side, you have Megatron, Starscream, Devastator.
So just I have to say, Devastator is officially Brawl.
Right.
That is,
yes.
So Devastator is in the second movie. That is acknowledged to be an error in the subtitles.
Oh, okay.
I don't know for the life of me why they haven't corrected it, because it's like Cybertronian script. You could just go back in. But yeah, the M1A1 Abrams is Brawl.
Mm.
Yeah, and then Bone Crusher, who's awesome. Barricade, who's the cop car.
Love that.
I love, absolutely. It's like to serve and enslave. To punish and enslave. The underside of cops, which again is like not something you'd expect from Michael Bay.
No, he didn't mean that as satire. He did not mean that. Yeah, that's not satire.
I know. It's not. It's not that clever. But Barricade, right? Barricade works. Yeah. And then of course Blackout, who's the first Transformer we see.
I want to talk. Yeah.
Let's talk about that. So I mean, I think the movie kind of starts weak. It starts with the military and sort of on a base, and you're like, why am I watching this? It's very generic. It's very uninteresting. And then you get Blackout's attack in Qatar. And I think it is a set piece. I think it is staggeringly good. You get some of the transformations in the Bay movies are
overcomplicated. Yeah, they're a bit overcomplicated.
So, I mean, I have very mixed views because I'm a G1 guy, right? I like the blocky stuff, but I know why they thought that wasn't going to work on camera, and they went with this Bayverse kind of aesthetic, which I never really liked, but I like certain characters. So the transformation is kind of, none of those transformations really make sense. I mean, they're not running the CAD files don't really turn one thing into the other thing. There's a lot of moving polygons, which annoys me. But it is, again, you were talking about the sense of war. You really feel, and again, like this is the Superman 78 thing, right? This is Jurassic Park. The primary goal for this is to feel Transformers are real. And right from that first scene, you get Transformers are real, and one Decepticon is a real threat. Devastates a base effectively and brilliantly. And I think it's fascinatingly good.
I agree. I think it's such a well done setup, and beautifully shot. I mean, I was watching this on the 4K, and it's just fantastic. But like, you get like the Blackout comes in, it's the sunset as he's flying in, and they recognize it, and then from that moment of transformation, and him just attacking the base. One of the things I kind of love about it, though, is the fact that this is going to be hard to. This is a word we will not use often with Michael Bay. They kind of hold back on some things as well, though, because you never fully see Blackout as his transformed as the robot. You see it from a distance, then you see extreme close-ups, and you're constantly sort of kept. You see enough to give you scale, like how big this thing is, and you get its power, but you never really get stuff, because then you get the photograph. Is the point, isn't it, that Tyrese Gibson's character sort of gets this photograph of it, and you are kept in enough to be like, yeah, what the hell if you didn't know any of the Gen 1 stuff, if you just came into this, you'd be like, what the hell is that? Like, this is, incredible. But it works as a set piece. Like that idea of it starts with chaotic war and it ends with chaotic war, because you do get that thing of like they are taken by surprise and they don't know how to react to it, and it just devastates that base. And it's a really, really solid opener for a film. I really enjoy it.
I agree, and I love Blackout. I love that character. I love the look of that paved low, and that sense of like when it begins to transform, and you're watching this for the first time. This is the first transformation on screen, and you see that rotor come up, and you see the hologram, right? And it's just like, I mean, my heart skips, and I still feel that magic in that scene, and that's saying a lot.
Yeah, no, it works. It's such a. I think the thing is, they realize that, they know that. I mean, this is one of those things we've said about the feel of Spielberg, and I do feel it like in certain moments. This is one of those moments where I feel that like Spielberg leant on the shoulder of Michael Bay and was a bit like, hold back, don't blow your load all at the beginning. Let's do it this way. And it works because of that. And that, like you said, that transformation at the beginning, because you don't see it all, you just sort of see it, and then it peels away because everyone's running and screaming, and then that's it, and it's off to the races. But I think that about all the transformations, I get like a feel of it becomes a bit. The transformations in and of themselves are interesting, because I then get a similar feel when you first see Bumblebee. So you've had you've had Blackout, and then you're going to get Bumblebee, and you obviously you've had the whole thing with Barricade, which is so you only really see villains. You only see the first two Transformers you get are it's Blackout and Barricade, isn't it?
I think we see Bumblebee standing up. I think that's the second but we see him from a distance, and Sam's like, my car just stood up, right? I don't think he's seen Barricade in robot mode yet.
No. Oh, yes, right, because he sees him, because then he's like, then Bumblebee's chasing him down, and you get the whole thing on the bike, don't you? Yeah. And that's where he comes across. He sees a police car and says, like, my car is chasing me down. And then he obviously becomes Barricade, and that whole, and that's where I was like, that whole, because that's when you get the first fight scene between an Autobot and a Decepticon.
Yeah.
And again, I want to point out the good and the bad. I think, again, I love that scene. I think it works really well. I think the car chase that it results in is great. It mostly works. Acorns, right? Acorns, as we've talked about. It gets a little bit choppy as throughout this. It's like, which robot's fighting which other robot, and which part of which robot is which. Yes,
this is totally fair, right? And so, again, sort of thinking of Acorns, right? Like, Frenzy isn't named. Thrall is given the wrong name. There are 3 different Decepticons who never speak. And it's not because, like Bumblebee, he's lost the ability until he magically has it at the end. And then has lost it again for all of the sequels. I know. But, I mean, it's not because of that. It's just because Bay can't be bothered, And so there are multiple characters in these sequels who are never named, never have a line of dialogue. You don't know what ends up happening to them. Like, they're one of the Transformers in the movie. What's going on here?
Yeah.
And you don't even know who's who in one scene. And there are debates about some of this stuff to this day on Transformers bulletin boards and stuff.
Well, I would say there's something I listened to another podcast called Now Playing, and they did the Transformers thing, and they came up with a term for when they watch Michael Bay films called Baysiness, which is basically sort of like, it's just laziness. Like, like you say, he's gone, I can't be bothered to do that. Like, that character, I want to see that character because it's cool, right? But I don't need to expand upon that character. And so you sort of have to go, it's Baysiness, and it's fine. You either like it or you don't. And I find there's quite a bit of that, and it grows throughout the franchise. But there's less of it here. But you're right, there is a series of sort of like characters that come and go. Like, I don't even know like what happens to Barricade. I
mean, Barricade survives. He's in later movies, but you never see him. He's not really in the final battle there. You see him rolling near Hoover Dam. then that's the last time you see him. Right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's a whole bit where like they say, because they start calling on them, don't they? And they all respond, and that's where Devastator's brawl is called Devastator and stuff. So they all respond. Right. Do they all get there? I don't know, because
the roll calls.
Yeah, because they're not in that final battle. Yeah.
Well, so let's talk about the, sort of like wrap up the sort of first half of the movie. And it occurs to me that we're talking about like Bay's structure, that this follows such a conventional structure compared to the other movies.
The sequels,
And it really has Sam going on a classic hero's journey. There's the, there's the invitation to the call, and he rejects it. I mean, this is really classic stuff. The whole thing, the magic of him and Bumblebee, works for me. I love the Bernie Mac, cars choose the driver. I love that the first song Bumblebee plays is "Who's Gonna Drive You Home" by the Cars, which is a great song, but also 80s, also, works for the magic of Sam and Michaela. Something I will dig it for, we talked about Michaela and how she's treated. Michaela arrives to the barricade Bumblebee fight on a mechanical scooter. and Sam's response, when she's not directly being threatened at all, is what he should do is run over, jump on the back of the scooter and say, "Get us out of here." But that would give a woman agency. And so what he does is instead runs over and tackles her to the ground.
I was going to say, he basically clotheslines her off it, doesn't he?
and acts like he's just rescued her, and then flees on foot with her from certain death. Like, this is exactly, again, competent woman has arrived, been clotheslined by a man who then expects to be thanked for it, and put her in deadly jeopardy. This is kind of the problem with gender, from the beginning. But then an hour in, you have like the Autobots arriving, and I will say that. With the protoforms flying in.
Love that. I think the music. One thing I want to say is actually the score to this film as well. I want to throw out that the score to this film. I love the score to this film. I've actually got it. I think it's perfect. Not perfect, probably, but it's really strong. And that scene of the Autobots arriving is really, really good. The protoforms. I love this idea that they are just they're transformating mechanically biological, whatever it is, entity that can change their form, and they are pods. Like, they don't need a ship to travel through space or whatever, however they've got there. Forget the sequels that later give them massive ships and everything else. But they have that thing, and I like the fact you see them in that protoform. And again, I kind of like guessing. You get to see them all choose their form. Like, Jazz goes to the Cadillac shop, and Ratchet comes out of the as the ambulance, and he's come after the sort of the first responders.
They got paid. There's so much product placement in this.
But one of the ones that I find funny, because they try to show an element of sort of the robots in disguise and all that kind of stuff. And then they show basically Optimus Prime stood on the side of a road watching a truck and then transform, and I'm like, you haven't done great, but it still works for me. That whole scene works for me. And I think that magic you said about, I think there's just a magic to that scene of seeing those characters becoming those robots becoming those vehicles. And again, the whole thing of like Bumblebee being the old Camaro and then transforming to change to become the new Camaro.
The concept Camaro,
The concept is all cool. Like, it all really works for me. So, I'm like, oh great, these characters look good, the music's good. I kind of there's one of them's gone through like a garage or something, and there's a funny. It's a silly line, but it makes me chuckle. Is when a guy's running past and he's sort of been filming it. He's like, "It's 100 times better than Armageddon, I swear to God."
Oh yeah.
And I was like,
I kind of cringed at that line. Where I always thought it was Armageddon not capitalized, and then I'm like, oh no, that's a Michael Bay inside joke.
I was like, oh, that's funny. No, I kind of like that. That made me chuckle. And so when they all turn up and that, and I do like it, and then it gets dinged a little bit.
Well, let's pause there, because let's talk about some of these choices. I agree with you. There are way too many scenes, including just standing at Sam's house, where they're obviously going to be spotted. Right? You are not very effective robots in disguise. And sometimes they hang a light on that problem. and sometimes they don't. But either way, it doesn't make a lot of sense, including at the very end of the movie. It's not even clear that they're still hiding, but we know that they're still hiding. But Optimus is just standing in a field again. Like
all 30 feet of him. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. And so, but that's, I like this thing you had about the protoforms. And that was one of the things that I have mixed views about, because like protoforms and transformers mean something. I don't like what they mean as far as like how transformers choose their forms and everything. This is all part of the mythology that has sort of sprung up post G1. I didn't like the Allspark, instead of the Matrix. They used that so they didn't have to use the word Matrix so soon after the Matrix movies. And then they use the Matrix in the next movie anyway.
Yeah.
So I never liked the Allspark. That's invented here. Every movie's kind of got to have a MacGuffin. I'm so sick of Transformers MacGuffins. I can forgive it in the animated movie with the Matrix, but the Allspark is, again, like the Colonel. It starts down this road. The protoforms thing, I mean, but at least there's thought put into that. And I think you can see a thoughtfulness in this movie that isn't there in the sequels. That, that protoform idea is part of why do they have ships, is exactly as you say. Also, this movie is careful with size. Yeah. One of the key problems with Transformers is that, Megatron would turn into a handheld pistol. Right.
Yes.
Except when it needs to be except when it needs to be held by Starscream, who's got enormous hands, and then it's exactly the size to fit his hands. Giant robots turn into cassette tapes. I mean, so there was this mass shifting problem of the original show. It came from the toys being different sizes and coming from different lines originally, and so this is a problem, and Bay was determined to fix that problem. Now it's still there. Let's be crystal clear. It's still there. Starscream should be enormous. Starscream should be, a lot bigger than he really is. So should Megatron. And their size does change moment by moment, right? Having said that, they did not include RC as a motorcycle because they would in the next film, but Bay thought it would be too small, and had to be too small. And secondly, like Optimus Prime's cab has extension on it. And that's explicitly to give him more mass so that he's bigger in robot mode. So there's a thoughtfulness to this, like you said, with this arrival scene that is not there in other movies. And even if I don't agree with all of their answers, I respect that they've tried to make the Transformers make a little more sense. Because I love the Transformers, but there's nothing especially logical or consistent about them.
Well, it is. It's that thing, like you say, it works for me, that revival scene. I love this thing of the mass shift and the fact they do try to address it to an extent. And like you said, there's a little bit of it still, but like it's not noticeable enough to be like, oh, Megatron's a handgun and now he's a giant robot. Like it's not as bad as that. But like I say, one of the things is that you have all that sign, a lot of, like I say, consideration given to it. But then when they're all introduced in that alleyway and stuff, and it's tried to do sort of like, I am Optimus Prime, and you have Peter Cullen doing the voice, and it's like, oh, cool, it is the voice of Optimus Prime. It's great, and I love all that. When they get introduced, we've mentioned about Jazz doing his breakdancing, which is possibly the worst part of that scene. But you then sort of have Bumblebee sort of like, was it like float like a butterfly, dance, sting like a bee, kind of sort of doing his boxing thing. And then Ironhide's just sort of like, threatens them with his cannons. He's like, I'm just joking. I just wanted to show off my cannons. And you're just like, it's trying to give a glimpse of each of the characters, but it feels really weirdly rushed and like awkward, that whole scene. And then because it's followed by they go to the Witwicky house, and it's all that sort of like, we're trying to hide massive robots around this house, and there's the whole earthquake scene. So it's sort of, that whole bit becomes the awkwardness where I'm like, oh, you started so well with this, and I love the designs when you do see them change and stuff. Like I get that massively overcomplicated and some of the transformations, but I like the designs enough. But then when they're sort of hiding around that house, and then they all change into the vehicles in the garden and stuff, it's like, wait a minute, you're telling us you've learned all this stuff from the internet, enough to be able to learn our language and sort of stuff, to change into things, but yet you haven't figured out that having a sort of a truck in the back of someone's garden is going to be a problem.
Yeah, no, I mean, I like that scene where they're like, you're not hiding, I think it's funny. It works for me. But there are other scenes that I don't like that, where it's clear they don't understand anything about Earth culture. I would say that thing with Ironhide, which he explicitly asked permission to murder the Witwicky parents.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say that's another one of these kernels where, you pointed out that as they're introduced, Jazz is sort of the racist kernel. There's also this problem of sort of the Baysiness as you referenced it. But also I would say, like, forgetting what a good guy is.
Yeah.
Where it's kind of funny that Ironhide, as the weapons expert, is always wanting to shoot things and shoot humans, but this will be a problem in later movies. And straight up Optimus, not long after that, once Sector 7 strangely detects radiation, which is never mentioned again in any of the Transformers movies, like they're poisoning all of their allies, and then Optimus Prime flees, and he's stepping over manned civilian cars. He's endangering human lives. This happens several times in this movie, where I would also put that in this kind of kernel of, like, I give it a pass here, but it's this weird way in which the heroes aren't heroes.
Yeah, there's a level of this, and I've always thought about this as, in action movies and stuff. Heroic actions are given a pass. So, for example, I always think of like the Lethal Weapon films, or Commando with Arnie, or something like that. Like, someone opens fire in a public space. If it's the hero shooting down baddies, it's fine, because they're doing it to the baddies. We're forgetting about stray bullets and all this other stuff. Like, you don't think about those things. And it's very much the same here, where we know they are the heroes because they are the title characters. They are the Autobots. They've had the heroic music, blah blah blah. They've been introduced as the heroes. So when they do things like threaten to kill the people in Sector 7 and demolish the car and stuff, you're a little bit like, oh, it's taken because Sector 7 is the bad government coming in to do this stuff. Which, to be fair, and this is the thing, they do then sort of like have the thing where, like I say, Optimus, I love the fact that basically Optimus rips the top off a car by lifting it up, and then rips the top off to threaten them and stuff. Having and could quite easily, as you said, have killed people in several occasions, like by accident. When they take down Bumblebee and they freeze him and stuff, and I think that scene works incredibly well as well. That's like really heartfelt scene where they're hitting him with the nitrogen, the liquid nitrogen, and all that other stuff works well. And you get like Sam runs in and tackles one of the guys and stuff. Love it. But then when he's taken, and Optimus, they actually saying to Optimus, like, we've got to go save Bumblebee. And they're like, no, there's no way of doing this without hurting people, humans. And I'm going, doesn't seem to bother you a great deal in some other scenes. Like, you really seem to be quite choosy about how this works.
Well, and I think this gets to be a bigger problem in the sequel.
Yes.
I mean, this is sort of like the movies forgetting these rules, right?
Yeah.
But, to be fair, every Batman story, for 25 years has had the same problem, right? Like,
every
I don't kill
superhero
people.
film.
I just drop them off buildings.
Yeah, every superhero film does it. Like, let's not kid ourselves. Like, every everyone launches into Man of Steel as being possibly one of the worst examples of this thing and stuff, and to the extent that even the sequels tried to redirect to rectify it. But they're all as bad as each other.
Well, I mean, look, when you're driving the Batmobile through crowded city streets with machine guns. Even Tim Burton knew. Like you see people running out of the way. You've got Gatling guns, and you're firing Gatling guns on the streets of a metropolis.
Flying in with the Batwing and just opening up with missiles. Yeah.
Yeah, and then and then the Batwing crashes. Oh yeah, that's called endangering people. I mean, like a company would be sued for doing this, and rightly so.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so this is not unique to the Transformers franchise,
No.
but the same way that Bay's style of cinematography sort of gets a pass, gives you, you can kind of elide those logical flaws where you're like, why are they here again? How did they get to this? You sort of forget that. This is something that kind of works in reverse, that the endangerment of civilians you can kind of give a pass to in Commando and action movies and superhero movies generally, but sometimes Bay like makes such a point of showing you that like there's no need for Ironhide to beg on multiple occasions to murder people.
Yeah.
There's no need for this.
No, I mean it's interesting that it's in the finale, in the big battle in the scene. There's a point where, and they're trying to do something, but Megatron's fighting Optimus, and Optimus gets thrown into the side of an office building, and you see it from the perspective of the people sat in an office. Firstly, why they're still in the office, I have no idea. At this point, like the city's being bombed to shit, like it's gone off the radar, like it's gone off, like the whole thing's on, and there's still people seem to be sat at their desk. That's I tell you what, that is an American attitude towards work that is commendable because every Brit has gone at that point. But
I actually just talked to people in Hawaii who got the text message saying, a nuke is on its way. Right. This is not a joke. Right. And the text says, this is not a drill. A nuclear missile is on its way. And their response was to go to work and put in a full days of work while they wait to be nuked. And they're like, well, did you not think it was real? Oh no, we all thought it was real. We just thought, well, I thought, okay, so in fairness,
nothing better. Yeah, it's a fair point.
Americans do.
Yeah. But the thing is, so he does that, and they all get away, and then he sort of like falls off the building, and you sort of see him land in the street, and you see that he sort of lands perfectly between two crowds of people, like no one is hurt. They're trying to sort of hammer home that there are people about, but they're not getting hurt. However, they also then go back to the heart of the battle. And you never see bodies, but you have seen cafes get struck. You have seen, like, at one point, like Ironhide sort of diving over, doing the slow-mo somersaults and firing rockets and all this other stuff. Like, people have been killed in this scenario.
Oh, yeah. Thousands of people are dead.
Yeah,
there's a jet slam into skyscrapers. Yeah, this is not that long after 9/11.
Yeah, I thought
F-22s. Yeah.
And so, yeah, I am thinking that whilst I'm watching this and going like, this is carnage, but it's doing it in a cartoony enough way. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's done in a cartoony enough way that I'm like, I'm able to accept this as fantasy, and I'm able to put that aside. That, like, it's not in the same way that action movies kind of do, that you're supposed to accept them as that sort of like action fantasy thing of, Die Hard 4, for example. Like, yeah, he's going to fly a jet, or he's going to travel on the wing of a jet while he jumps off a lorry, and it's going to do this and that. Like, okay, like I'm going to sort of, it's fun enough that I'm going to enjoy it, but I'm not going to worry about it.
I can't accept that in those later Die Hards. But
no. But I'm trying to think of a good example. But
I resent I want to see the bodies, right? I mean, I'm the guy, and I say this about Man of Steel too. I mean, Man of Steel pulls its punches. I want to see the bodies, and I think the closest we get is there's a car that's clearly got people in it that Megatron picks up and throws.
Yeah.
And again, you don't see the bodies, but it's clearly like, oh, those people are dead. I mean, this is Miracle Man.
Yes, I agree.
But so I hate this sort of falling Optimus problem. But it is clear, like, it really sells. I don't know about the cartoonishness. If anything, I would say kind of the opposite. That, like, it really sells. This is war, and this is war in an urban setting, and people are going to get killed.
Yeah,
I
yeah, no,
wish it
I
were
get you
more
right.
honest about that, but
Okay, maybe I'll rephrase it. What I mean is to use let me use Black Hawk Down as a
mm,
comparison piece then, because if we're talking about urban war or in that kind of environment, and it does it throughout this film because you have like the whole fight in the Qatar village, and they use the sort of they've got the plane that comes in with the big 50 caliber guns and stuff like that, whatever bullets it's got. The war, the battling is good, and I feel it. It feels gritty, it feels dirty, it feels chaotic, and so I'm sort of feeling that same comparison where I'm like, yeah, it feels like a war, and I'm getting that chaos. The one thing, however, is as you say, when you watch, say, Black Hawk Down or one of those other sort of like, legit warmers, you see the people getting shot and you'll see the sort of the bodies and that sort of thing. And Bay won't hold his punches. Like if you go watch, let's say, 13
mm,
Hours and that, you'll see that he will do that elsewhere. But
mhm.
I do think that sort of like you say, this is intended to be a sort of like a kids film, a sign of franchise. And so you have to elevate it above that to be showing people running. So you have the people leaving the field of war and all this other stuff. They constantly want to show people escaping, and then they will
Mhm.
show like empty shops or empty cafes or whatever to show they've got away. But yeah, you sort of know. So that's the cartoonish that I'm saying. That they're saying, okay, we're
Oh
going to
yeah,
give you the
I hear you.
we're going to give you that cartoonishness that you have to accept that people are safe. But you watch this and you go, oh no, they're picking body parts out of that pavement for weeks after this.
Oh
Like
yeah,
it's
and
um
all of the other bots have fallen and squashed people,
yeah.
and
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and they're also very spiky and very complicated. Like they're picking like hair and flesh and blood out of their gears. Like
Oh yeah. No, yeah,
um,
and they should. And, I mean, I wish that were in there,
yeah,
But you're right. I mean, we have a weird attitude toward violence where,
mm,
you know, there's plenty of massive violence in this, but
yeah. One
showing
of
real consequences.
one of the things I want to sort of highlight that I do like, and I think works. Because you say about the sort of the CGI, I think the CGI in this is very, very good. Like they've clearly put a lot of work into it. It's not like now where they're crunching through it to get as much done with as little sort of time. This use of the transformation though. So there's scenes of like say Starscream transforming in the air from a jet into a robot and then back. Others doing a similar thing where you see transformation as part of movement, at times and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
really works. They've done it throughout the film at parts like you'll see like Bumblebee, the car will jump off and he'll transform to catch people. And they use it in other later in the sequels as well, both. I don't know, it just works well in this film where they'll show the transformations work well. I think Megatron's first transformation, like he literally just jumps and transforms into that big like alien jet thing.
Cybertronian jet. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like, cool, it looks good. Like those transformations, but when they have transformations in the battles,
Mm.
they used the transformation as part of their um offensive or as part of their defense as well. Like I don't know. Do you know what I
Well,
mean?
no, I agree, and that's always been kind of there in the Transformers. Like, you'll
Yeah,
have like a car that like an arm comes out of because you need it for the script at that moment to hold something. And weird stuff like that. And occasionally it'll be used sort of like in a strategic military way. But you're right. I mean, I think to me, the two best fights illustrate this.
mm.
One is the Bone Crusher versus Optimus Prime going into Mission City, uh, where I just think it's one of the best action scenes ever. Where Bone Crusher, I mean, you see this mind-sweeping vehicle tear through a car and transform into robot mode, and you're just watching it swat cars on the highway left and right. The carnage is great, and it's driving on wheels. Like its feet
Mm.
have the wheels from the car on it, so it's basically like on
Roller
roller
skating.
skates,
Yeah,
and looks just absolutely terrifying. That's an example of a Bay design that I really like,
yeah.
um, where it just looks spindly and spiky and just terrifying. And um, and there again, Optimus is clearly endangering humans, but you feel as if he has no chance. Um, Like, and humans are dead, right? Because they're driving, and Bone Crusher is slapping them
Just
away.
flinging cars left and right.
Oh yeah. And I think the terror of that is really well done. But the best example of this transformation thing you're talking about is Starscream fighting the Raptors,
Yes.
the F-22s, where that has got to be one of the coolest sequences. Like that's something I feel like that's something every time I watch it, I feel like I waited my whole life to see this, like to watch a transformer in battle, transforming in flight, dropping back, landing on a plane, transforming back into a plane, and now being behind one and being able to maneuver better using transformation, and doing this over a city. I mean, watching the jets slam into buildings, and it's just staggering, mind-blowing, even seeing it for the upteenth time.
No, I agree. I think it works really well. And I think it's one of those things we've said about, like the protoforms and that thing. It's like, this is where they've put some thought into it. Like they've really considered, they've storyboarded this out, and they've done, I can imagine they've done the animatics and all this other stuff. Like they've really put some thought into like how this is going to work. Does it always work in the fights? Because, sometimes it's a bit like, oh, they're tumbling, who's doing what to what body part kind of thing. I get that. But again, that sort of, I think, adds to the chaos. But there's some shots and some scenes in this, like, and I think that's my favorite is the Starscream versus the Raptors. I think that in those jets, it's just so well done. It's so well thought out, and it's so violent in that way of just aggressiveness. It's a really well done scene, and that's I'm really keen on all that. There is the other thing I would say, which kind of makes me chuckle, is the opposite. Is when they do sort of, there's a little bit of basiness coming on. For example, two things I want to throw out is when Sam gets to the top of that building, whatever it is, big building, and then you have, he's under threat from Megatron, who's basically ripping his way through that building. And I kind of like that like Megatron's just sort of like, this isn't going to stop me. He's like, I'm coming for you, boy. Is it Hugo Weaving that did the voice of Megatron?
Welling
in the film, yeah. He's really good. But so he's tearing his way through that building, and then you sort of have Optimus Prime running from roof to roof and jumping as he's gone through. And in my head, I may not have noticed it before, but watching it this time, I was like, "You weigh tons."
Oh yeah.
And when you're running from foot to foot, all your weight landing on those places would not support you in any way, shape, or form. So there's little bits like that where I'm like, you've just done something really, really cool, and now you're sort of like, you're asking me to accept something that looks a bit silly. So this is what I'm saying. They sort of like give with one hand and take with the other. But overall, it works because I'm not supposed. It's only because I was coming at it with a critical eye, I think, more than anything this time, that I was going, okay, that looks a bit silly. But
yeah, and to me, that like the same thing is true when they step in the street. I mean, if you've ever seen like the damage done by a semi-truck that's just dragging something, I mean, it tears the street up. You have to repave the entire street. When Optimus Prime is stepping on every single one of his footsteps is tearing up the concrete. People can't drive over that anymore, in a regular tire. I mean, this would be much more chaotic. But you're completely right, and I kind of classify that as like part of the lack of blood, lack of body parts, lack of just it's realistic enough that I'm really happy. But I, of course, always wish it were more realistic. And I saw the body parts, and I saw that real physics.
Yeah, I mean, having said that, we are talking about alien robots fighting in an unnamed American city, But yeah, I agree. I think.
Well, so 2 points about that. One is it is an unnamed. It's Mission City, which is a city that doesn't exist. Obviously, it is basically Las Vegas, right?
Yes.
So Las Vegas is 25 miles away from the Hoover Dam. Mission City is 22 miles away. But it looks
in the
like
other direction. In the other is it in the other direction? It must be like
I guess, but why does it look like New York? It's not in the desert.
I have a theory about this, and I think there is and I could be miles off, and I've not looked at anything, but I have a guess that there is a version of a script where that final battle happens on the Strip.
Yeah. I wouldn't mind that, but maybe there was what cost, or
Yeah,
that was too close to reality. It's not representative enough to watch them destroy Vegas.
but I do think if they've gone from Hoover Dam, they're gonna be battle. I honestly
Mm.
think at some point there was a discussion where they were going to fight.
Mhm.
That battle was going to be in Las Vegas, and that was going to be a fight on the Strip. It'd have been cool. I'd have been all in for that.
It would have
I'd
been awesome.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm irritated that, like, I really like the third movie. Actually, I think it's actually good. But and the third,
Which one's that? Which one's the third one?
The devastation in Chicago.
Oh,
And,
Battle of Chicago. Yeah.
Chicago laid waste.
Yeah.
And I know Chicago enough. So you really get a sense of a real place. It's so weird that it's Mission City. It's like one of these,
Backlot City,
where it's like, right? It's like it's Gotham, but
Yeah.
now Batman's going to have an adventure in Los Angeles. Like, well, wait, yeah. So it's a little strange. The other thing that's really upsetting about that is that all of these humans are dead. All of like, okay, look, it is an amazing climax. I love the last 20 minutes of this movie. It is devastatingly brutal. It is, and it is the entire concept of the Transformers, their war, our Earth kind of idea, which we've never seen done this well. I mean, this takes a key concept of all of these alien invasion stories, certainly of the Transformers franchise, and actually shows you what that would be like in a way that a cartoon with an unlimited budget refused to do.
Yeah.
Having said that, why are they in a city?
Yeah.
Like, they were at Hoover Dam. Literally, Epps, whatever his name is, says, "Oh, let's take the Allspark and hide it." You know how, like, Superman's always like, we're going to take this fight out of the city. This is the direct opposite. And those grunts, who are constantly lionized in this movie, to the point where the Secretary of State says, like, you better do what he says. He's not accustomed to losing. This kind of lionization of these soldiers, they are directly responsible for the destruction in Mission City, which happened for no reason.
Yeah. No, I agree. Other than it looks cool. But you could save this. I mean, this is where one of those things where again, and I know I do this a lot, but you have someone say, right, here's your destination that you've got to get to. We have this bunker, we have the, Area 51, whatever the bloody hell you want to give it. Area 51 is a good one. We've got to get to Area 51 from Hoover Dam, because Hoover Dam has been compromised. However, in order for you to get there, the only road available is through this Mission City. You've got to go fast, because we cannot put these people in jeopardy. And then it's like, oh crap, it went wrong, and now we are fighting in Mission City. Make it so you've got to be part of it. I don't know, but you're right, because otherwise it's like, we found the most populated area in this desert state.
Yeah, literally. And I mean, and also, like, those raptors that are there to fire on Megatron, they're totally content with firing F-22 missiles into a city street.
Yeah.
I mean, which I'm okay with, but there should at least be some dialogue about, like, are you sure we should do this, right?
Give us permission, kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, right. I mean, I'm firing on American civilians, essentially. This is, but raw military, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's very confused. Yeah, you're right. But literally, the idea is, and in a movie that has the Allspark, you can justify anything, right? There's no need to just say, let's hide the cube. Where should we hide it? In the most densely populated area possible.
We're getting closer, Tom. In fact, we're over time, but I want to sort of wrap up about two things, because I do enjoy that kind of stuff, right? And there's two things I want to quickly touch on. We talked about the mass shifting. I don't understand the Allspark, how it's a massive building-sized cube and then reduces down to something the size of a basketball, yet is able to be carried around by humans. I don't know how the mass of that works at all. I'm going to accept it. It's fine. But again, it's ridiculous. But we talk about the Allspark. The Allspark creates at least three other transforming things, evil for a start. Like it creates them. It creates a car that attacks its driver, a vending machine that starts firing off cans at people,
7-Up machine,
a 7-Up machine that starts attacking people, and then an Xbox robot as well. And like, there's no sort of like, yeah, we should really deal with those because like we've just found like these people shot to death by 7-Up cans.
Yeah, it's firing them out at 200 miles an hour, and it's piercing people's craniums. No, I mean that is slightly addressed in the sequel, but yeah, that is a problem. It's not clear at all. I mean, the Allspark is stupid, right?
Yeah.
But you know, and what really hurts me is the Allspark was invented for this movie, and it's been in almost every iteration of the Transformers since. It's only here because you didn't want to use the Matrix, dude. Like this is a dumb idea, and how the Transformers reproduce, which it's tied to, is all kinds of messed up and stupid. Yeah, it's not clear why they're evil. It is true though,
because it's Sam that's holding it as well. So it's not like it's Megatron that's trying to create more soldiers. Yeah, it's bizarre.
Right? Is the Allspark evil? Well, so there is a line of toys that was created for this movie. That was actually planned earlier, but it was called Real Gear Robots, and it was basically like cell phones and cameras, and so it all basically like Soundwave and Blaster and all and Perceptor and all that kind of one-to-one scale stuff. And they said, yeah, this is the stuff the Allspark animated, and they're all running around in this universe now. So I thought, okay, that's kind of cool. But yeah, how did you keep this a secret? Like, there's no way any of this is going to be kept a secret.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. It's just that bothered me a bit more than anything. There's the mass shifting, but then also the evil robots that seem to come out of nowhere, like the vending machine in particular, when it forms a 7-Up like Gatling gun. But
I love the vending machine, but
it's a great design. But I don't know. I don't understand why it's attacking people.
No, I don't either. But again, it's kind of like Bayes going for the joke, right?
Yeah.
And it works as a 30-second bit of film, right? Like, I like it. I don't know how it fits with this universe.
Yeah. Anyway, that's the thing. So, any final thoughts then on Transformers 2007?
I think this is a good movie. I love the climax of that sense of real war and real stakes. But I also, want to wrap up. I just want to say that there are two moments that really sell this for me and that really stuck with me as a viewer this time. One is an hour in, as Sam turns to Michaela and says, 50 years from now, when you're looking back at your life, do you want to be able to say that you got in the car? And it's this moment where that's the moment in the hero's journey where they accept the mission. But it works. It has that movie magic, it sells itself, man. And then selling the desperation of that final fight, even if Sam running with the Allspark, the MacGuffin, while he's being pursued by giant robots is weak at times. We're 2 hours in and Michaela and Sam are holding hands, and at this point, I can totally believe that they've had a love connection, despite the film's problems, because they've been through this adversity together. Where she says to him, knowing he might die, no matter what happens, I'm glad I got into that car with you. And he becomes a hero at that moment and runs off, knowing the danger. Those moments work. Damn it, they don't work, and that's that kind of Spielbergian heart at the core of this film that really helps it transcend.
No, I think that's a really good point, because I think you're right. That's where this one works. Is that I think the human characters do work for the most part. I think there is you feel that that Spielbergian heart, and I love that phrase because I think that's there, and I think you're right. It's almost like it's anchoring, and I feel it's anchoring Bay. Where it's like hold back. You don't need to do everything, right? And it works because of that. And you see this with the directors. Again, I often think this about Tim Burton and the Batman films. I love both of his Burton Batman films, but clearly he was held back with the first one. Then they were like, "Cool, go for it," and you get Batman Returns, which is like a gothic nightmare of a sort of superhero film. But it's there, and I think they say it works because you do feel those moments of connection between these characters. And I think whatever has become of Megan Fox and Shia LaBeouf since, in what reputation they have, I think they both do a fantastic job in this film. I think they really do stand out. I think there's many other in the cast that do well, although they are weird. Like John Turturro seems is an odd character and choice. Then there's a few of the bits and pieces, but at the heart of this film works. And again, I think the Transformers work in that sense. Yes, Jazz is clearly an issue. I do kind of have issues with Ironhide and his attitude, but the relationship with Bumblebee works. Optimus Prime is brilliantly done in this. I think Peter Cullen, the fact they got Peter Cullen to do it was a stroke of genius because it hits that sort of like nostalgia. And I just think a lot of this sort of works. And when it works, you said, it works. And it works enough for me that when it does come to the rest of it, the basiness and some of the silliness and those moments of like head scratching, there's enough good going on that I'm like, yeah, do you know what? I'm fine. I'm riding this roller coaster and I'm going to enjoy it and I'm going to, have fun with it. And I'm, there's enough goodwill for me to get through this and come out the other end having had fun and smiling. Some of the sequels won't have that, and they're longer and more difficult to watch. But this first one, I think, is a real standout, and I think it does. Unfortunately, I think it gets tarnished and tarred with the brush of the sequels. But this is definitely a standout film. And weirdly, just as a final note, as this sort of subgenre of Saturday morning cartoon adaptations, I still think this is one of the best, especially of the 21st century. Comparing this to the G.I. Joe films or the Ninja Turtle films, or that came, I think, even Snake Eyes, which came more recently. Like this film, Transformers, I think it still stands as possibly one of the best. So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Well, it's been a joy talking about this. And if other people are like the Transformers, we'll be talking on Patreon about the first 3-part series of the original animated show.
Oh yeah,
I'm sure I'll force Scott to do every one of those sequels if we last enough.
We will. We both sort of have a sort of we've done. I'll make. We'll see what we both have to sit through Return of the Jedi at some point to finish off the Star Wars trilogy. There are other things. Maybe there's a franchise I can make sort of Julian go through. We're going to be doing Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah. Alan Quatermain or
Yes, I'll find something. We've done all of Quatermass. Yeah. Well, we haven't done all of Quatermass. There is one more, but it's more of a TV show, so we'll cover that one day. Anyway, no, you're right. On Patreon, go check out what we've done Patreon. We call it like it's stories at a time, extras. Really, I think I'm not sure what we're going to call it, but we've recently done. What have we done?
Besides Twilight Zone, we've also done Battle Royale 2.
That was it. God almighty, my brain went completely blank. That's right. Battle Royale 2.
And Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the original BBC show.
Yes.
You and I, having loved that show growing up, I think we had very interesting things to say. It really helped me understand that show better, talking with you about it.
Yeah, that was a great exploration. I said those 6 episodes from 1981, that was a good bit of a deep dive on that. So if you like what we do on that, they're an hour long. We've really tried to keep them sort of, focused on that, but we have. So far we have done Battle Royale 2, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the original TV series, and we are going to be doing. Is it called More Than Meets the Eye? The original 3-part.
No, the original. Oh yeah.
Of Transformers, the animated series. So we're going to get more Transformers, and we're going to be doing this more as we go forwards. We've got Blade Runner 2049, and we're going to be doing the shorts that were done to try and fill some of the gaps between the original and the new one. And there'll be other stuff as well that we will get in there. So you're going to be getting some stories at a time extras. And so, yeah, if you like what we're doing now, go check out the Patreon for £5, which is less than sort of $5 a month, or whatever it's around that, around $5 a month, you will get some extra stories at a time of space. So that's fantastic. Go check it out.
Yeah, multiple stuff every week.
Yeah, all kinds of
I
stuff.
mean,
Twilight Zone, me talking 30-minute thoughts, and we are working on some other ideas that are going to be coming down the road. And not all of it audible. We are going to be talking about some more physical things. We'll keep that under wraps for now until we're sort of finished. But maybe for the end of the season, towards the end of the season, we'll announce that. But anyway, yes, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much all for your support. If you do like what we're doing, obviously leave a review. Go check out the Patreon, as we've said. But for now, thank you very much. And we shall see you on the next episode.